up, y'all? It's Ty. In this video, we're going to be reacting to more Sporting Logically, talking about what happened to the top 25 high school basketball recruits of 2014. Now, I love going back 10 years ago and looking who is the best coming out of high school. And did they pan out? Because sometimes, like, again, stars can only mean so much. You know, there's walk-ons, there's D3 guys that have made it to the NBA, so who you were in high school only means so much. So it's cool to go back, look at how good these guys are or were compared to how they are now. Shout out to my guy. Make sure to go smash that subscribe button on his channel. Let's get it.
Being in the top 25 of the 2014 high school basketball recruiting rankings pretty much guaranteed you a shot at the NBA. For some, it might take a few years in college, while for others, all throughout this top 25, they were freshman sensations that went on.
It is true, though. High school to college, normally they're sensations, then they get drafted, but not all of them
become all NBA level players. But of course, the end result and what their NBA experience actually looked like for each could be wildly different, regardless of how highly touted they were as high school recruits. One year, you're a top 5 high school player in the country or completely overlooked amongst other 5-star recruits, and the next year, your NBA dreams are over or you're one of the best young players in the entire NBA. These kinds of stories are everywhere in the top 25 of this class. First up is a memorable one, Tyler Ulis.
At number 25, he about went to Iowa, man. That would have been fun. Ulis was so fun. He was so fun in college.
From a 5-star prospect to actually making it to the NBA is pretty crazy. He was one of the best high school players in Illinois and committed to play for John Calipari at Kentucky. And after just 2 seasons there, he developed into one of the best point guards in the country.
Told you, he about went to Iowa. I told you.
At the time, everybody really liked him as a draft prospect, so he put his name in the 2016 NBA draft, but obviously he was going to have some problems at the NBA level. To this day, he still holds the record as the lightest player to ever be measured at the NBA Combine, and that caused him to fall all the way into the second round.
He was the lightest? How much did he weigh?
He was selected by the Phoenix Suns. For Ulis to succeed in the NBA at his size, things were going to need to go perfectly for him, and they simply didn't. He had trouble adjusting, shot under 30% from three-point range, and had some injury issues, playing in just 133 NBA games before returning to Kentucky and joining their coaching staff.
I mean, he'd be a good coach, though, for sure.
Number 24 is Chris McCullough. He was a crazy athletic forward with a
Chris McCullough. Did he go to Syracuse?
Physical profile that got a lot of NBA teams excited as he committed to Syracuse.
See, I know ball,
16
man.
games there, he was impressive enough to be selected in the first round of the 2015 NBA draft, as he was picked 29th by the Brooklyn Nets. This was especially impressive considering the reason that he played only 16 games in college was that he tore his ACL and was still recovering from that injury.
And he still got drafted in the first round.
He did make his NBA debut halfway through his rookie season with the Nets, but never made much of an impact for the team. After some time in the G League, he was traded to the Wizards and has since played professionally in China, Puerto Rico, Lithuania, and honestly too many other places to list here. McCullough had the talent to be a solid NBA player pre-injury, but was likely better suited in a different era as a traditional power forward, and ultimately had a disappointing career with just 59 total NBA
Injuries stink, though. Like, he tore his ACL in college. That stinks.
Played. Next up at 23 is Devin Robinson, who actually had a really long college career at Florida. He was a skilled combo
Devin
forward
Robinson
that didn't make a huge immediate impact and went through a coaching change, but went on to figure things out as a junior and shot nearly 40% from 3.
Jeez.
He decided to leave school a year early and enter the 2017 NBA draft, but went undrafted, the first player in this top 25 to not be drafted in the NBA. He signed with the Wizards after the draft and then bounced around to
I feel like I don't really know this guy that well.
Before signing with some teams overseas and played in just 8 total NBA games in his career. Next up at 22 is one of my favorites and finally an active NBA player at the time of this recording, Keita Bates-Diop. Out of high school.
He played for the T-Wolves. He was tough at Ohio State.
He signed with Ohio State and was a very exciting prospect, a legit 6'8" with long arms and plenty of offensive skill as well. He had a bit of a slow start in college and dealt with injuries, but in his 4th season, he averaged nearly 20 and 9 and was named Conference Player of the Year. And then entered the 2018 NBA draft as a bit of an older player considering his high school pedigree, but he still had plenty of upside. The Minnesota Timberwolves drafted him in the 2nd round, and after bouncing around a bit, he found his home in San Antonio in 2020, improving as a shooter.
He was fun for the Timberwolves too.
Himself a significant 20+ minute per game role before then moving on to the Suns in 2023 and establishing himself as a legit NBA player. Next at 21 is one of the most hated players of all time, Grayson Allen.
Grayson Allen's good though. Like, he's good. I don't like him, but he's good.
Duke, where, yes, he became a fantastic college player, but also became known for some questionable decisions that some even went so far as to say were dirty plays, which has followed him into the NBA as well. Despite the negative perception of him, Allen had a great 4-year career at Duke. Although obviously most players ranked this high out of high school want to get to the NBA as soon as possible, Allen won a national championship as a freshman, made multiple all-conference teams. It was a fantastic...
He's a shooter! 42%?
After his senior year, he entered the 2018 NBA draft and was picked 21st by the Utah Jazz, and honestly, he didn't really look like he belonged at all at first. After just one season, he was traded to the Grizzlies as a part of a Mike Conley trade and then was later moved to the Bucks, but in both Memphis and Milwaukee, Allen has managed to carve out a nice little role. Not a great player, but a solid career so far despite being a top 25 draft pick and high school recruit, even with the negative perception of him. Next up at number 20 is James Blackman Jr. He was a 6'4" guard out of Indiana and finished third.
I remember him in Indiana.
Mr. Basketball voting, only trailing Trey Lyles and Trayvon Blewett. Blackman committed to Indiana at the college level and put up some really impressive stats, averaging nearly 16 points per game.
Where's he at? He's in the league,
one of the best guards in the conference. He decided to return for his second season, but unfortunately only played in 13 games due to a knee injury, tanking his draft stock. He came back for his junior year and once again scored well, but on a bad Indiana team. He entered the 2017 NBA draft after that season, but went undrafted, and despite some stints in the G League, never actually...
See, this stinks for him, because if he would have went out after his freshman year, he probably would have got drafted.
Played in an NBA game and attempted to continue his professional basketball career overseas. But he did at least sign an NBA contract with the Sixers after the draft, which means that every player that we have covered so far at least made it to the NBA level. And that will continue at number 19 with Rashad Vaughn. As a 6'6" guard with great offense,
he never panned out either.
I really thought this guy was going to be at least an NBA rotation player. He committed to UNLV out of high school, and after an impressive freshman season in which he averaged nearly 18 points per game, he declared for the 2015 NBA draft, which turned out to be the correct
number
choice
17
because the Milwaukee
pick.
Bucks selected him in the first round at 17th overall. This is a perfect example, by the way, of how crazy these rankings can be. At 20th, Blackman was a good college player but had to stay 3 years just to go undrafted, while Vaughn was nearly a lottery pick just a year after graduating high school. Anyway, back to Vaughn. I really thought he was going to be good in the NBA, but it just has not happened. He made no impact in Milwaukee in a few seasons there.
He's done absolutely nothing for what? Number 17 pick?
Traded to the Nets in 2018.
Y'all might not even know who Rashad Vaughn is.
In various G League teams, but he also has gone on to continue his basketball career overseas and does have 139 NBA games on his career.
I mean, that's a lot of games.
Next up at 18 is our first big-time NBA player, Devin Booker.
And
just keep
good,
in mind,
man.
from this point on, that there were 17 players in this high school class ranked ahead of Devin Booker, who went on to become one of the best guards in the entire league. This is why I love to look back at these.
Like, Devin Booker is a bucket getter, man.
For Booker, he was certainly a great high school prospect and committed to Kentucky, along with the previously mentioned Tyler Ulis. He was on an absolutely loaded college team that nearly went undefeated the entire season, as evidenced by the fact that he didn't start in a single game and played just under 22 minutes a game.
22 minutes a game for Devin Booker in college. Think about that.
Exclusively a shooting specialist simply because Kentucky didn't need him to do anything else, and despite not starting a single game in college, he declared for the 2015 NBA draft and was picked in the lottery 13th by the Phoenix Suns. From there, we pretty much all know the story. He developed into an all-NBA caliber player and exceeded every expectation people had for him out of college. And in hindsight, it's pretty silly that he wasn't even ranked as a top 15 player.
It is kind of crazy
in his high school class.
With how good he is now.
17 is a relatively famous college player, Joel Berry. Out of high school, he committed to UNC, where his career honestly got off to a rocky start. He played just 13 minutes a game as a freshman, but that team had some really good guards, and Berry was one of 3 highly touted freshmen joining the team that season. He stuck around and actually ended up having a great 4-year career in college. He led the team to a national title as a junior, and by his senior season, he was one of the best players in the country. Once his college career was over, he declared for the 2018 NBA draft, where he went undrafted, which wasn't a huge surprise considering he was a small guard and an...
I mean, that's the thing. He's just a small guard. He's more of like a college player than an NBA
prospect.
player.
He spent some time in the G League, but never stuck around, and after a brief stint overseas, announced his retirement from professional basketball in 2021 and is now a college basketball TV analyst. Despite never appearing
in
regular season NBA games, he did sign an NBA contract with the Lakers and played a few preseason games, keeping the streak alive for the top 25 of this class. However,
the fact that he's ranked ahead of Devin Booker is crazy to me.
That streak ends at 16, Isaac Copeland. He had a pretty weird but also productive college career, initially committing to Georgetown, but after 2.5 seasons and a back injury, he transferred to Nebraska, where he became a really solid player for them in the front court. He was one of the best forwards in the conference as a junior, but had his senior year cut short by a torn ACL after 20 games.
See, that's the thing, dude. Injuries,
NBA
man.
prospects were slim. He entered the 2019 NBA draft, went undrafted, and only got a local tryout with the Texas Legends G League team, and injury ended any professional basketball career he might have had. The first player in the top 25 to not sign
It's
any
just
kind
sad.
of NBA
Injuries,
or G League contract.
injuries are sad.
Next up at 15 is maybe my favorite player from this entire class that didn't become a star.
Justice Winslow.
Justice Winslow.
I thought he was always
He was
going to
a
be
really
good.
intriguing perimeter player with great skill, but as one of 4 really highly touted prospects joining Duke that season as a freshman, he had to fulfill a role. He ended up as kind of a small ball 4 on that team, and at certain points looked like the best guy on the roster, helping Duke win the national title in 2015. After just 1 season, he declared for the 2015 NBA draft and was selected 10th by the Miami Heat. And the weirdest part of that draft process was that it was rumored that the Celtics offered Charlotte, who were picking 9th, 4 first-round picks to move up and select Winslow, but they declined and took Frank Kaminsky instead, freeing up the Heat to get Winslow 10th.
Kaminsky is
In
crazy.
the NBA, he had his moments, especially in some weird lineups where he would be the point guard, but has yet to make a real impact.
He hasn't
outside
really
of that
done
on
anything.
various
I thought he
teams
would be
around the
good,
league,
though.
Although I certainly haven't given up on him quite yet.
I don't even know where he's at nowadays.
Next up at 14 is Isaiah Whitehead. He committed to Seton Hall and despite an impressive freshman season, decided to stick around in college for 1 more year and made first team all-conference as a sophomore. He then declared for the 2016 NBA draft and was selected 42nd by Utah before being traded to the Nets a day later. He actually played a lot as a rookie and looked like he might become a solid rotation player, but played
This guy is not a guy I
in
recognize.
just 89 total games across 2 seasons.
Maybe I'm a
before
casual.
playing in a variety of different professional basketball leagues overseas. Next up is a really good one as we start to get to the real top tier of this
D'Lo?
class, D'Angelo Russell. He committed to Ohio State, and immediately it was clear that he should have been ranked higher in this class.
Man, in college, D'Lo is cold.
He was incredibly skilled and was one of the best players in the conference as a freshman, which was evidenced by his draft position in 2015. He was projected to go top 5, but the Lakers really fell in love with his potential as the best guard in a class dominated by bigs at the top and selected him 2nd overall. Things didn't go great in LA, but he has rebuilt his career as an all-star in Brooklyn and has had a really nice career.
D'Lo has had a good career. Whether you like him or not, he's had a
player
good
that
career.
wasn't even ranked in the top 10 of his high school class. Moving on is one that might surprise some people, Kevon Looney. He committed to UCLA, which was a pretty big surprise.
It's crazy how much he's changed his
At
game.
the time, he played much differently than you might think. He was an agile forward with intriguing perimeter skills before a hip injury before his freshman season in college completely changed his game forever. He didn't miss any time due to injury, but he transformed into a much more traditional big than he was supposed to be as a prospect. But he was still really good. He was good enough to declare for the 2015 NBA draft as well, yet another one-and-done player from this class. He slipped a bit given
Look
the
at Looney.
injury concerns and his new style of play, but the Warriors picked him with the 30th pick, the last of the first round. At the NBA level, the hip injury continued to give him a ton of problems, and he spent a lot of time in the G League as he rehabbed and tried to get healthy. A few seasons later, he was fully healthy, in great shape, and a critical rotation piece for multiple championship
He was
teams,
good. He was good.
and has continued to be healthy and extremely
Obviously
impactful
now he's kind of like man, but he was good
for the Warriors.
Couple of years.
To completely change his style of play, overcome the injuries, and be as good as he has been a really impressive accomplishment for Looney. Next up is a guy that people thought was one of the highest potential players in the entire class, Kelly Oubre. He committed to Kansas and became the next in a long line of athletic high upside wings at Kansas, and after a solid but
I still think Oubre should be better than he is.
fantastic freshman season, scoring less than 10 points per game, he declared for the 2015 NBA draft, where he was expected to be a lottery pick, which he was, being selected 15th by the Hawks, but later traded on draft night to the Wizards. Throughout his career, he's had some really good moments, but never really became the 3-and-D wing that he should have, always a little bit too focused on creating his own shot, but still a good player. Moving on now to
And that one Warriors team when Oubre was just taking a ton of shots, that team was
number 10
horrible.
is Theo Pinson, and you probably know this guy is one of the most
UNC,
entertaining
man.
bench players in the NBA that never actually plays, but he was a big-time high school prospect. He also committed to UNC, and just like Joel Berry, who we talked about earlier,
get up.
he ended up staying all 4 years there. Considering how highly recruited he was, it actually took him a long time to make a real impact on the team, with really low scoring numbers in his first 3 seasons. But he was a great teammate and role player, and as a senior had a really great all-around season. After that year, he entered the 2018 NBA draft, but by that time it was clear that his
That's what I'm saying. He's just old at that stage.
case scenario was as a career role player. Through his first 5 seasons in the NBA, he has appeared in just 127 NBA games for the Nets, Knicks, and Mavs, but continues to stick around as a great locker room guy.
So I'm guessing he made this video a while ago.
And one of the most beloved teammates in the league. We move on now to the biggest draft
that was 2018. Never mind.
of the class, Karl Anthony Towns. Out of high school, he was a consensus top 10 recruit, but ESPN was actually the lowest on him of everyone,
That's crazy,
with everyone else
number
putting
9.
him in the top 5. He was a really skilled big that was extremely agile for his size and committed to that absolutely loaded Kentucky team that I've been talking about throughout the entire video. Now, just like Booker, Towns' stats weren't that impressive, but his impact was. The longer the season went on, the more clear it became that his NBA potential was enormous. He, of course, declared for the 2015 NBA draft after that season and went first overall, but I'm going to save the rest of that story for a little bit later in the video when I talk about who he went ahead of in that draft in this same recruiting class.
Chill. Cat's had a good career. For being the number 9 recruit coming out of high school, he's had a good career.
Now we get to some pretty big disappointments within the top 10, the first of which is Justin Jackson at number 8.
It's kind of sad.
He was a big wing with perimeter skill and a smooth in-between game and committed to UNC out of high school.
Bro, UNC and Kentucky, man, they get everybody. It's crazy.
College player, but always left a little bit to be desired, especially as a shooter. Just like Pinson and Barry, Jackson ended up sticking around in college for a while to develop as a player, and as a junior was one of the best players in the country, most notably improving a ton as a three-point shooter. That improvement helped his draft stock a lot, and he ended up declaring for the 2017
Where did he
NBA
get
draft
drafted?
as a really intriguing 3-and-D player with offensive upside. He went 15th in that draft for the Sacramento
15. That's still not super
Kings,
high,
but
but
just never really worked out at the NBA level. He has bounced around to various NBA and G League teams, never making much of an impact, and even though there was a moment in Dallas where it looked like he might be a rotation player, that seems to be over now. Next up at number 7 is a really up and
it's just crazy.
down
Stanley
career,
Johnson.
Stanley Johnson. He was a crazy athletic wing with ideal NBA size and committed to Arizona out of high school. After a great freshman season where he showed every single tool that you would want from a complimentary NBA wing other than three-point spacing, he declared for the 2015 NBA draft. Unfortunately, those spacing concerns caused him to slip a bit to 8th overall, where he was selected by the Detroit Pistons. I really thought he was
It's crazy though. If you never develop a jumper, it's
going
tough.
to be good in Detroit because he brought a ton of energy and effort as a defender to go with his great physical profile, but that lack of spacing continued to be an issue for him.
Just tough.
And despite some moments with the Lakers most recently, he's been nothing more than an NBA journeyman, bouncing around on teams as he tries to find his place. But
He's
he has
tried.
played in nearly 500 NBA games, which is a great accomplishment. Moving on now is a guy you might be surprised to see ranked this high, Trey Lyles. Yes, ESPN
It is crazy that you look at Trey Lyles now, and he's a role player in the league, but it's crazy he was this high.
had Lyles ranked higher than his Kentucky teammate Karl Anthony Towns. At Kentucky, Lyles was kind of given the Devin Booker treatment of playing a completely different role than he would have on really any other team. They already had 2 great bigs in Cat and Willie Cauley-Stein, but Lyles was too good
Cauley-Stein
not to
was
play,
good.
so he ended up playing on the wing a lot, completely out of position, and his stats weren't impressive at all, especially his three-point shooting. But again, that team was so loaded that he declared for the draft anyway, going 12th in 2015 to the Jazz. It took a while for him to make his mark, but after years of being
He's been good. He's been
solid
fine.
player, he has found his home as a rotation big with the Kings. Next up at number 5 is a really interesting guy to talk about, Emmanuel Mudiay. He was an extremely athletic point guard as a kind of John
It's
Wall
crazy. I thought he was going to be good too. Defensively, 6'5".
style
Like,
player, and his NBA potential seemed immense.
I thought he was gonna be
Initially,
good.
he committed
I
to
was
play
wrong.
college basketball at SMU, but later changed his mind and made a massive decision. He signed a 1-year contract worth over $1 million to play in China for a year instead of going to college, one of the first modern players to do so. He only played in 12 games in China, but put up some really impressive stats and pretty much maintained his draft position going into the 2015 draft that he would have in college, and he got to make a ton of money that year. He ended up being selected 7th in 2015 by the Nuggets, with some people calling him the steal of the draft. The problem was, his athleticism was pretty much all he brought to the table. He wasn't a great passer, couldn't shoot at all, and his decision-making was questionable.
and that's tough. You're a 6'5" point guard. You can't shoot. You can't pass. You can't really do much.
After a few
Just
years
athletic.
of limited improvement in Denver, he moved around the league, and after 5 seasons and around 300 NBA games, he went back overseas and has continued to sign with teams outside of the NBA to continue
kinda
his
sad.
professional basketball career. Moving on to number 4, Tyus Jones. Yet another player.
It's crazy he was at number 4. That's crazy. I didn't know that. Tyus is good, but number 4
to commit to Duke. There were times during his high school career where people actually thought he was the best player in the class.
I want the Timberwolves to get Tyus, man.
He was a bit of a weird NBA prospect because true point guards were devalued at the time, and he didn't have an elite physical profile or skill. He went 24th overall to the Cavs, but was traded to the Timberwolves on draft night, and he was a solid but not great rotation player for them. And after 3 seasons, he signed a pretty significant free agency contract with the Memphis Grizzlies, where he developed into one of the best bench guards.
Tyus he's good,
in
man.
the league.
He's good.
He was so good, in fact, that the Grizzlies had to move him to the Wizards in the 2023 offseason to open up a starting opportunity for him. And he's one of my favorite underrated players in the entire league. At third now is a tough one, Cliff Alexander. For the first time in a while.
And didn't he go to Kansas?
There's probably a lot of you wondering, who the heck is this guy? Well, he was an incredibly athletic but slightly undersized big with high NBA upside if he could expand his skill set a bit. He committed to Kansas, where he was good as a freshman but not fantastic, which obviously was concerning. He never actually finished that season either, as eligibility concerns with the NCAA caused him to leave the team early. Despite that, he ended up deciding to declare for the 2015 NBA draft after his freshman season anyway, where he went undrafted.
That's crazy. You declare as a freshman to go undrafted after being, what, the number 3 recruit in the nation?
The Blazers after the draft and tried to make some noise in the G League, but his NBA career was pretty much over before it started.
That's nuts.
He appeared in just 8 NBA games and has signed some contracts overseas, but his limited size and skill set as a forward just never allowed him to reach his true potential as a top 3 recruit in this class. Second to last now is honestly a really forgotten name from this class, Miles Turner.
I still think Miles Turner's potential isn't, like, he's good,
didn't have Turner ranked this highly, but his NBA potential was clear. He had some spacing ability and looked to be an awesome rim protector as a big, and showed all of that as a freshman at Texas. After that season, he declared for the 2015 NBA draft, where he went 11th. He fell a bit because teams didn't know if the spacing would really translate in the pros, and they didn't want to pick a rim protecting 5 really high in this class. The Pacers were the team that selected him, and he's had a really good career.
Miles has been good.
Starter that's made a lot of money at the NBA level despite never becoming a star. And now we get to the number 1 recruit in this class, Jahlil Okafor. By the time his high school career was over, he was the consensus top guy in this class and was a really unique player too.
He was good in college.
Duke in a dominant freshman season.
He was so good at college.
He was a true post-up big that had a ton of moves around the basket, but was a bit limited athletically and a defensive liability. For most of the college season, he seemed like a lock to go first overall in the 2015 draft, but the emergence of Karl Anthony Towns as a much more versatile prospect pushed Okafor down to the 3rd pick, being drafted by the process-era Sixers, which
thank gosh the Timberwolves didn't take Jahlil Okafor,
a disaster for him. There were a ton of bigs in the way in Philly, and
I mean, if you look at his post game, though, he's tough.
He got a chance to develop, not to mention his flaws as kind of an old-school post-up center didn't help either. He bounced around a bit, and there was some hope that his career might be revitalized, but that simply never happened. He played just 247 NBA games, most recently in 2021, and has gone on to sign with multiple teams overseas. And that is the top 25 of the 2014 high school.
Shout out to my man for this video. These are fun to watch.
Example of how not only these rankings,
especially for me, I used to be really into college basketball and like to go back and look like Cat gets a lot of hate now, but remember, he was the number 1 pick, and he's one of the better players here after being what, the number 9th rated player in the class. I'm saying guys like Devin Booker, super slept on. So shout out to my man for this video. Let me know your thoughts. Who is the most slept on? Who is the most overrated? Drop a like on the video. Subscribe if you're new. And as always, man, I love you guys. Have a blessed day.